My name is Mackenzie Wilson, and I am one of the co-founders of Delight Ministries. And I also get the honor and the privilege to be our story curator. So I'm the one who gets to read all of the Delight stories and kind of edit them and choose which ones go in the book. And I'm talking to you today because you are going to be writing a story for Delight, and we are so excited. Hopefully by this point you've read our Share Your Story intro that you should have received in an email. If you haven't read it yet, then hit pause and go read that before you watch this video. But that document will kind of walk you through the logistical side of writing your story. But I want to spend the next few minutes of this video walking you through 5 really important things to remember when writing your Delight story. Number 1, and probably the most important thing to remember before you start writing, is that we're looking for you to write a story and not necessarily your testimony. I know that you probably all have amazing and beautiful stories of how you came to know the Lord for the first time. But for the purpose of the Delight book, we're looking for you to write about something you experienced, something you dealt with, something you went through, or learned about during college. We don't necessarily need to know your whole entire life story, but we really want you to focus and fixate on one thing from college. And this moment doesn't have to be something that lasted over a year or 2 years or 3 years. It can literally come from one moment. Maybe you were walking to class and the Lord taught you something really huge that you want to share with other people. So think long and hard about what story you want to share before you begin writing. Number 2 is we want you to choose one topic and stick with that topic throughout your entire story. Now, first things first, you want to get creative with what your topic is. A lot of people, when I read through their stories, their topic ends up being, well, college is hard, but God was with me through it all. And that's true. I think we've all experienced that, but we need your topic to be more narrowed and specific than that. So, for example, some topics used in the past are things like vulnerability or friendship or learning that you are enough or different things like that. So before you start writing, get creative with, okay, what do I want my topic to be? And really hone in on that and be specific to that. And as you're writing your story, it can be really easy to kind of get off track. And so one little tip that I have for you is that when you write your story, at the end of every paragraph or 2 paragraphs, look back and ask yourself the question, does what I've added, does it elevate and highlight my topic, or does it distract from my topic? And if it elevates it, then you're on the right track. But if it distracts, then you're kind of going to want to rethink what you're adding. When you get to the end of your story, I should be able to walk away with 1 to 2 sentences and say, hey, this is what her story is about and this is what I learned from it. So make sure that you pick that one topic and you stick with it throughout the entire writing process. Number 3 is striking the perfect balance between the telling of your story and the teaching element of your story. Now, I either get one or the other. Some people submit stories and they literally spend 6 pages giving me every single detail that ever happened, like down to the nitty-gritty things, and then they put 1 paragraph in the end saying, oh, and this is what God taught me through it. Or I get the flip side. They spend 1 paragraph in the beginning explaining, oh, when I was in college, this happened, and then I get 6 pages of theological wonderful things, but I think what you're going to want to do is strike the perfect balance between the 2. In order for me to trust you as an author and to soak up the things that you're saying, I want to know you and your personality and what you went through and what you dealt with. So really spend ample time telling the story. Paint a picture of what happened. Make me feel like I was there in that moment. And then on the flip side, I want to walk away with something from your story. I want to learn a lesson or kind of feel like I relate to your story and can apply it to my own life. So spend time doing the teaching element. Maybe you introduce a Bible character that parallels your story. Or maybe you share about a sermon that you heard that really spoke to your topic, or what other thought leaders or influencers have said about your specific topic. Explore scripture that kind of elevates your topic, and really spend time teaching as well as spending time doing the storytelling. And as you look back on your story, make sure that you've woven both throughout the entire story. Number 4 is to be creative. Now, I have read hundreds and hundreds of these delight stories, and I have to say that my personal favorites aren't necessarily the ones where something crazy, off the wall, bizarre happens, but instead, it's when somebody takes everyday, mundane, ordinary moments that we've all experienced, but they tell them in a new way that's creative and different and compelling, in a way that draws you in and makes you want to read more. I think when that happens, it's really cool because we're able to relate to the story. And when you're able to relate it to your own life, then you care that much more about it. So what I want you to do is really spend time being intentional about being creative. For example, spend a good amount of time on your introduction. You don't have to jump right into the nitty-gritty, heavy details of your story, but first spend some time introducing you and what you're about and what you're passionate about so that I have better background on you when I read through your story. I think if you really just look for ways of, okay, how can I use my voice and my creativity to tell my story, then your story will kind of exude that naturally. Don't feel like your story has to be like the sample stories that you've read or maybe other Delight stories that you've read in the Delight book. Really be true to yourself and just have fun with it. Don't overthink it, have fun with it, and I know it'll be awesome. And number 5, probably the most important, I think so, is to be vulnerable. If you're a part of Delight at all, then I know you've heard this. We are such big believers in the power of vulnerability. We want our Delight chapters and our discussions to kind of ooze and exude vulnerability, for people to be able to walk in the door and feel comfortable to share whatever they're going through, no matter how messy or imperfect it is. And so in order for that to happen, we ask that our story writers lead with vulnerability, that they're the first ones to kind of raise their hands and say, hey, this is me, this is what I'm dealing with, it's not pretty, but hopefully you can relate. And what we find is that when people do that, when they're the first ones to kind of step out and say that, then other people in the room are much more likely to say, hey, you know what, me too, that's my story. So we're asking you to be the first ones to be vulnerable. So what I suggest doing is before you begin writing your story, just spend some time in prayer and ask the Lord to give you the opportunity to be vulnerable in your story. Now I know that when you're writing, it's a little more difficult to be vulnerable than maybe when you're in person with somebody, because you can use things like voice inflections or facial expressions to kind of express vulnerability, and you don't get that liberty when you're writing. So once again, you're gonna have to be creative with how you express vulnerability. So maybe that's saying things in a different way. Maybe that's avoiding the use of Christianese that's maybe lost some of its meaning to us. Maybe it's telling details that you've not really shared before. Or maybe that's just simply expressing what you were feeling during those moments. I don't think we do that often. So really look for opportunities to be vulnerable, pray and ask God to give you those opportunities. And I think if you're intentional about it, then your story will automatically begin to kind of express that vulnerability. And we're so thankful that you said yes to being the first one to be vulnerable. Okay, so that's it. Those are the 5 most important things to remember when writing your Delight story. So just a little recap. Number 1, write your story, not your testimony. Number 2, choose one topic and stick with it. Number 3, find the perfect balance between the telling of the story and the teaching of the story. Number 4, be creative. And number 5, be vulnerable. So now you have all the tools needed to write your story. Make sure that you've read that intro packet. Maybe watch this video one more time just so that you really soak in all of those things. Be sure to read the sample stories that we've provided. And then if you have any questions, concerns, or need help at all, feel free to reach out to me at any time. You should already have my email address and phone number. I'm here to be a resource to you throughout the entire process. And I honestly cannot wait to read your first drafts of your story. Thank you again, and we will talk soon.